He made her drink poisoned wine on the feast day she had invented to celebrate his birth, and the servants applauded because 5 minutes earlier, the queen had still been bragging about learning to milk goats barefoot. They called her Malada, the bare-kneed, back in the Haysour village of Teslav, a mud-streaked slip of a girl who outran tax collectors by vanishing into rye fields taller than she was. Nobody, least of all Malada herself, imagined that flinging rocks at a passing duke's carriage would change anything. Yet her aim cracked his ceremonial chalice. The duke howled about peasant insolence, and Malada spat, "If your wine were worth drinking, my stone couldn't break it." The duke laughed, hard, then invited her to serve as a jester in his traveling court. In 4 turns of the moon, she traded dung-splattered skirts for motley bells, discovered the court loved irreverence almost as much as gossip, and learned to read ledgers while the duke's scribes slept off wine. By winter, she was advising on grain tariffs, because a woman who has starved understands bread better than a baron who never sees his kitchen. Court wits repeated that line so often, it reached King Radoslav himself. The king, aging, superstitious, and bored, summoned the girl who talks like thunder. Rumor said he wanted fresh amusement. Cynics muttered he wanted fresh blood. Malada arrived wearing the same patched boots she'd worn in the fields and greeted the monarch with, "Majesty, your throne's cushion is leaking feathers." Instead of execution, she earned a bewildered grin. Radoslav made her his informal conscience. Every decree had to survive Malada's blunt commentary before it left the hall. Peasant levies shrank, pointless wars stalled, and nobles grumbled that the king was courting revolt by listening to a farm girl. Their complaints only amused Radoslav, who proclaimed, "If she can silence famine, she can speak for the crown." 6 months later, he married her. Chroniclers gasped louder than church bells. Coronation scribes tried to invent a pedigree, lost cousins, distant knights, anything, but Malada cut them short. "Write the truth. I was born to a man who owned 2 goats and half a roof." That line spread faster than plague, and peasants toasted her every night with watered ale. She answered by opening the granaries during a lean harvest, noting that rats respected no coat of arms. Nobles plotted, priests prophesied doom, and merchants hedged bets by sending her crates of exotic spices she promptly distributed to village healers. With every gesture, she tightened the loyalty of the many and deepened the resentment of the few. Enter Prince Radomir, her only child, born under a comet that cathedral mathematicians insisted meant greatness or catastrophe, depending on whose patronage they sought. Malada adored him with the dangerous blindness of first-time parents who survive poverty and then mistake comfort for immunity. She let him sit in on council meetings at 8, let him sign minor edicts at 10, and commissioned a festival for his 12th birthday featuring traveling alchemists who claimed to freeze roses mid-bloom. The nobles watched a royal air raised on populist sermons and whispered about rains slipping from their hands. At 16, Radomir discovered alchemy's darker subset, poisons distilled from sweet-smelling resins. His tutor, Master Benez, demonstrated how a sun-yellow syrup could kill a boar in a heartbeat, yet pass as clarified honey. Malada scoffed, pointing out that peasants had brewed foxglove tea for generations. Nothing new there, just fancier glassware. The shrug wounded Radomir's pride more deeply than she guessed. He began meeting bennies at night, trading coins for vials, scribbling in codices he locked away. Meanwhile, Malada's reforms shredded the treasury. Abolishing bridge tolls won travelers' hearts but emptied royal coffers. Banning grain speculation pleased bakers but infuriated magnates, whose fortunes fermented on price swings. When plague flickered along the coast, Malada diverted Silk Road duties into quarantine houses instead of palatial repairs. She defended the deficit with a farmer's logic. Barns don't matter if the cows are dead. Yet each new policy handed her enemies sharper daggers for rumors. They found eager ears in Radomir, now 18, and convinced his mother's zeal would cost him a kingdom. Court gossip claimed the queen planned to name a council of commoners to overrule hereditary seats. Whether true didn't matter, the threat felt tangible enough to spur a conspiracy. The ringleaders recruited Radomir with appeals to lineage. Kings answer to God, not goat herds. They reminded him that every coin still bore Radoslav's profile, not Milada's. Benez produced a clear liquid said to mimic fever, leaving the corpse blotched like plague, convenient during an outbreak. Radomir hesitated only once, asking if the dose was painful. Beanies replied, "Only to those who regret." The prince nodded, a gesture historians later traced as the moment the kingdom's moral compass snapped. Milada, preparing the annual Feast of First Harvest, a celebration she'd invented so palace cooks could showcase peasant dishes, spent the morning tasting stews, laughing that the nobility would have to chew barley like everyone else. Radomir oversaw the wine cellar, an honor she granted without noticing the irony. During the banquet, he toasted to mothers who teach their sons mercy, an inside joke referencing her habit of pardoning pickpockets. She smiled, lifted her goblet, and swallowed Beanas's gift. The sickness struck fast, sweating, spasms. The crimson flush physicians misread as heat stroke from hearth fires. Radomir publicly wailed, demanded prayers, and locked the hall to prevent contagion. Within an hour, Milada rocked on her throne like a marionette with cut strings. Witnesses said she tried to stand, perhaps to flee the embarrassment of dying before dessert, but her knees failed. Radomir caught her, not gently enough to fool the servants closest to the dais, and eased her back. He whispered something none heard. A steward later claimed the words were, "This is for the throne you nearly lost me." But the steward also sold secrets for coin, so history keeps an eyebrow raised. Milada died before the cathedral bells finished tolling midnight. The official diagnosis, malignant fever. The unofficial assessment murmured in taverns, royal ingratitude. The next morning, Radomir issued a decree blaming the plague, ordered every quarantine house expanded, and doubled alchemist stipends. Purchases that conveniently erased evidence of poison research. He also canceled the bridge toll ban, citing fiscal prudence, and restored grain speculation to stabilize markets. The reforms evaporated like dew. Peasants who once carved her initials on barn doors now muttered about curses. But revolts need spark, and Radomir supplied one unintentionally. Milada had willed her personal jewels, a modest collection acquired more from diplomatic necessity than vanity, to fund widows of the plague dead. Radomir instead gifted them to nobles who had supported him. When a widow from Teslav traveled barefoot to petition, he dismissed her with guards' cudgels. The scene reached villages faster than tax collectors ever had. Within weeks, bonfires of grain ledgers burned along trade roads, and tollkeepers vanished into ditches. The kingdom cracked where it had once flexed. Radomir responded with the tool tyrants always trust, fear. He re-legalized trial by ordeal, arguing that iron and water revealed truth better than biased judges. Farmers who couldn't prove grain payments because they'd burned the receipts found themselves holding red-hot plowshares. Results were predictable. Sympathy shifted entirely to the oppressed. Monks noted that storms hovered above the capital like smoke above a funeral pyre because the sky takes sides when mothers are murdered. In the 4th year of his reign, Radomir unveiled a marble relief honoring his lineage. Himself and grandfather Radoslav front and center. Milada reduced to a background allegory labeled Fortuna Humilis, the humble fortune. The sculptor, bribed or bullied, carved her barefoot with goats at her feet. Villagers visiting the feast market laughed bitterly at the irony. A queen immortalized as livestock's companion. One night someone, chroniclers suspect a stonemason who'd lost 3 sons to Radomir's conscription, chipped away Fortuna's face until the marble bled dust. Guards arrested half a dozen suspects. The populace shrugged and supplied no witnesses. For every accused rebel hanged, 2 more appeared, armed with scythes and memories. Nobles panicked, realizing the monster they'd nurtured was wobbling on a throne of splinters. They attempted a genteel coup, documents of abdication, promises of a monastery exile. But Radomir, fluent in betrayal, anticipated them. He invited the conspirators to a midnight council, served spiced wine laced with the same resin Benez had perfected, and locked the doors. The next dawn, courtiers found a hall of corpses arranged in mock parliament, goblets still in hand. Above them, Radomir had hung a banner. "Thus speak the silenced." The message impressed exactly nobody. Poison is persuasive only once before it becomes prophecy. Peasant militias, united by grief and oddly efficient rage, marched on the capital without waiting for noble leadership. They carried scythes seasoned with salt to symbolize fields gone fallow under Radomir's taxes. City gates opened from inside. Palace guards remembered Malada's grain gifts and saw no reason to die defending her killer. Radomir barricaded himself in the chapel, clutching relics he'd ignored for years. Venus fled through catacombs rumored to house plague corpses pickled in lime. Poetic justice suggests he tripped on bones and shattered a vial, but records merely lose him in darkness. Radomir's last stand was appropriately theatrical. He addressed the invaders from a rose-patterned balcony, insisting that revolt angered God more than regicide. A farmer named Ilya threw a stone, just one, and shattered the royal lip the way Malada once shattered a duke's chalice. Blood spattered the marble roses. The crowd surged. The prince vanished in a crush of bodies, and when dawn came, only his signet ring remained, trampled into horse manure. Chroniclers joke that manure was the most honest seal the kingdom ever had. After the smoke cleared, leaders drafted a charter limiting royal power, using Malada's early edicts as precedent. They declared her feast of first harvest sacred, though future queens wisely honored it with water, not wine. Peasants rebuilt storehouses, this time in stone rather than wood, to outlast whims, as one mason carved over an archway. Bards sang that Malada had returned to the rye fields she loved, walking barefoot among ghosts who now slept with full bellies. Children repeated the cautionary rhyme, "Trust the hand that lifts you, fear the hand you raise." Centuries later, scholars still debate which was the greater miracle, that a goat-herding girl ruled a kingdom, or that her rule ended not with an assassin's blade, but a son's toast. Tour guides show visitors the cracked chalice, displayed behind glass beside a simple pair of patched boots. The guide usually finishes with Malada's own epitaph, allegedly whispered as the poison took hold. "A throne is just a chair until someone sits. Remember who builds the legs." Nobody knows if she truly said it, but tourists nod solemnly anyway, because it sounds exactly like something a barefoot queen would have told a spoiled prince, right before trusting him with the wine.